You'll know when you have a wild woman. She'll practice her craft without boundaries. She is truly autonomous. Her loyalty is only to the family she serves, a midwife who will not allow herself to be held back by a system she didn't create.
This podcast is for the birth keepers who want to grow and change. We are open to learning through self-reflection and supportive community. We are creating this space to explore without judgment. We are remembering we were
Born wild.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Born Wild podcast. I'm your host, Lea.
And Sophia.
We are very excited today. We have a very special guest that we're going to speak with. Suzanne Arms is here with us, and we had the opportunity to have a delicious meal with her a few weeks ago. Was it a couple months ago?
Oh my gosh, time has gone so fast.
Yeah, it's been a crazy fall. But she was gracious enough to come on the podcast. So if you're listening to this and you're a birth world person, you know exactly who she is. But just, briefly, the book, Immaculate Deception, game changer, huge book. It was your second book, I believe.
Yeah, one of my favorite pieces about your bio, Suzanne, was Suzanne Arms is a visionary who gets her message out through words, images, films. She's an inspired teacher, a passionate yet compassionate public speaker who synthesizes earth-based and indigenous wisdom, intuition, and modern science with models from around the world. Your mission is optimal human development and thriving children, families, and communities, which I think is one of the things we're going to focus on today, is about how to help families and babies recover when things, in air quotes, go wrong. But before we dive into that, we wanted to give you a chance to just kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you ended up where you are now.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's really good to be here. I appreciate so much what the two of you are doing, both in your practice as midwives and also in the podcast that you're doing. Yeah, when I listen to the description of me, it makes me sound like a really tall person. And I'm quite little. And getting littler as I get older. Oh my, how did I get into this? Well, I actually went to the University of Rochester, and my major was literature, but my minor was anthropology, cross-cultural studies. And that's where I first got interested in the whole question of why do we do what we do in the West, and how do other cultures do it? And it ended up being a question I often asked physicians, obstetricians, when I was photographing a birth, and I'd be out in the hallway with the obstetrician, and I'd say, so what would you do if you couldn't do a cesarean? What would you do if you couldn't do a vacuum extraction? And of course, they had nothing. There was no answer because they hadn't learned anything else. So I became pregnant at the age of, I guess it was 26, and I wanted to have a home birth. I was living in a part of the country in Northern California where there were home births and where people were attending births who were midwives. Early midwives at the time were called, quote, lay midwives. That's because they hadn't gone to nursing school. They were self-educated. And as fate, or my particular fate would have it, I never got to see a birth. And the reason that I was so anxious about it was that I had almost died being born when my mother's legs were held together and my head was pushed back with every contraction during the second stage because the doctor wouldn't come in. It was his night off, Tuesday night. And he had told my mother, don't go into labor on a Tuesday night. So, of course, we now know that it's the baby that starts labor, and I, being an Aries, decided I was going to start labor on a Tuesday night. So he refused to come. That was Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, whenever it was. And, or actually, I guess I started labor on Monday. But anyway, so the nurse held my mother's legs together and pushed my head back with every contraction. And that's because in those days, if a nurse allowed a baby to be born before the doctor was there, she would lose her job. Mm-hmm. It was extremely hierarchical and patriarchal. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know any of that. My mother hadn't told me my birth story before I went into birth. Mm-hmm. But I ended up having basically everything other than a cesarean that could be done at the time. And all of the drugs that were given to me were later taken off the market, being found to have adverse effects on the baby. Mm. And so that includes Nicental and buccal pitocin. And Nicental was the shot that the nurse gave me when I first got into the hospital. And she took one look at me and she said, "You're nervous." And she just slapped me on the arm and gave me a shot. Wow. And then, yeah, of course, there was nothing like informed consent at the time. And the buccal pitocin was a form of stimulant that was wafers put against the woman's gum. And nobody knew at the time that that went directly to the baby. Mm-hmm. So there was that. There was spinal anesthesia. Anyway, I ended up having my daughter Molly and a spinal headache for about 10 days. And it wasn't until about 9 months after the birth that I began to really question what happened. Mm-hmm. I would tell people sometimes, you know, I want to know what was the bus that hit me and who was the driver. You know, for some reason, I, among all the other women who had the same things happen to them, felt compelled to understand what was going on and why, and ended up spending a lot of time in the basement of medical school libraries, researching birth, researching all of the issues around the baby. And that resulted in Immaculate Deception, which at the time was a pretty shocking book, because I also photographed births with women who allowed me to be in the hospital at that time, and did a lot of interviews with people from other countries who were working as nurses in this country, and also with obstetrical residents who didn't like what was going on and would sneak me into the hospital. So I was very fortunate. And I think it was the right person, the right time, the right place. And I can't really say it was me. It was good fortune. Mm. And I remember when I was writing the book and I was talking to various people like obstetric nurses who would say to me, who do you think you are? You're not a nurse, you know, and that question really stuck with me. Who do I think I am? Well, I'm, I don't know how to describe it. There wasn't a word for patient advocate at the time. And I remember when I was on a television show in Washington, D.C., being interviewed. This is shortly after the book came out, and I had been put on the Today Show, interviewed by Barbara Walters. Mm-hmm. And so I was on this show in Washington, D.C. called, I think, Good Morning Washington. And I didn't know, as was often true, after the initial interview with Barbara Walters, I would be pitted against an obstetrician. Mm. And so there was me in a chair, and then the other side of the host was an obstetrician. And he introduced the obstetrician in glowing terms. You know, we have here today a man we know and love who we've had on the show many times, from George, I can't remember the university he was from, and Dr. Frank Barter. And on my right, we have an angry young mother.
Oh,
That's how I was
that's really how they
introduced.
wow. Oh.
Yes, yes. And it was, I mean, I was so shocked that, oh, anyway, when I came off of that interview, there was one person who came up to me and thanked me, and that was a Black cameraman. And he said, "Thank you, please keep doing this." And it gave me heart. But I was often criticized for writing that book, for daring to question what was wrong with obstetrics. And of course, it's a very patriarchal system, even though at least half of the people in it today are women. But, you know, they're raised and educated and trained in a patriarchal system. So that's a long way around saying how I got into this.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna say some of the best books are criticized. So
Yeah.
yeah. Wow, that's an amazing journey all the way from your birth to where you are now.
Yeah.
So like we had said, one of the things we wanted to get into today was how you talk about the innate intelligence of birth and baby care and how to repair it when things go wrong. Where
Okay.
did your focus around that begin? I assume
Well,
like
yeah, let's start with that, because my initial concern was with the mother, very self-centered. I'm a woman, and I thought about myself. I didn't really think what happened to Molly. I didn't really think about the impact of the drugs on her system. I didn't think about and the colic that she had, which of course, especially in those days, was just trivialized by saying, "Oh, it's just colic."
Mm.
The baby's screaming for 5 hours a day, and it's just colic. But it still didn't really get through to me until I got interested in pre and perinatal psychology. And I guess that was in the early 1990s. And went to one of the first conferences that was held on it. And my mind was just blown away when I discovered just how aware these babies are, and not just in birth, but in the womb, and the impact that a stressed mother and a mother who's taking drugs has on the baby. So I became very interested in the baby and the baby's brain development and the neurobiology, and in the whole question of why does nature do it the way it does, and the I don't want to say perfection of nature, but the template that nature has for bringing babies into the world. And it's an exquisitely subtle process. And when we talk about birth, we often think it's just the act of the baby coming out, you know. It's not. It's hard to say really when birth begins, because it's a series of interconnected, interlocking processes that start conception. Actually, before conception, if you understand how epigenetics, which is the ability of environment to turn genes on and off to cause them to be to come out in that child or not, affect the genetic makeup of that baby. And then it goes from conception to life in the womb. And we talk about life in the womb as if it's nothing, but it's 9 months that baby has lived in that womb of the mother, not just feeling her heartbeat and hearing the sounds of her abdomen and her digestion, but getting her hormones of fear or excitement or joy, relaxation, worry. And the baby gets them in several ways. I mean, the baby gets her hormones, which is the hormones of emotion, because emotion really is translated into hormones. through the umbilical cord. The baby drinks the amniotic fluid, which is full of her hormones, and the baby is bathed in it throughout the entire pregnancy. So I began to be very interested in the baby and began to look at how my birth of my daughter Molly had shaped not only me, but had shaped her. And that, the process of birth goes right on after labor. In the first few days after birth, when the baby's body is completely changing and shunts are opening and things are closing, as that baby shifts from being an aquatic being to an air-breathing being that has to regulate its own temperature. And then I got even more interested in breastfeeding, because of course breastfeeding is part of birth. It's not just a choice. People say, oh, it's a lifestyle choice. No, it's not. It's actually critically important for this baby's development, for the baby's gut. And we now know that the gut and brain have a direct connection, and that what's going on in the gut and the hormones of the gut directly impact the baby's sense of well-being or not. And of course, the baby and mother are one system. So that's another thing that I learned, that I had no idea. There's one system that affects each other, so that when that baby, for example, after birth, is just licking or nuzzling against the mother's breast, it releases about 20 hormones in that mother's gut. And those are hormones that cause her to be more relaxed. There are hormones that help her respond to the baby, and it does the same thing for the baby. So self-calming and feeling secure is directly related to how confident the mother is, and how much support she has and had right from even before conception. And it's so easy for women to take this and feel guilty about what happened to them if it wasn't an optimal experience for them and the baby. But in fact, there's very little choice in what goes on in birth. It's a system of care that has been designed in a particular way, and it's hospitalized care, and with physicians being in charge, and people coming in and out of your room who are strangers, and basically everything going against the needs of the mother to have quiet, to have privacy, to have darkness, or if she doesn't want to be in a darkened room, to be out in nature. So I talk about this because it's so important to understand that developmentally, nature has a system that has been refined over eons and eons of years to produce a baby that will be nurtured in a whole system, in not just by a mother, but by a whole group, by a tribe, by a village. And that is the way that baby's brain develops to its fullest potential. And so when I look around today at how much anxiety there is, and of course there's a great deal of anxiety that has to do with what's going on in the outer world, but so much of this anxiety starts when children are put in daycare at 6 weeks of age, and when mothers are pushed back to work because there's no guaranteed universal paid maternity or paternity leave, mothers and fathers. And when breastfeeding is more difficult, if you have a cesarean or you have an epidural, and it takes longer, and a lot of women don't feel they have the time, and they get bombarded by relatives and friends who tell them that they shouldn't pick up the baby when it cries so much, because that's going to spoil the baby. I mean, I could go on and on. Virtually everything that we do in the culture is designed to create what we've ended up with, which is a highly competitive culture. It's also very aggressive and very anxious.
Yeah, and
So-
women are so isolated in their postpartum too. You know how you talk about the village, and they just go home alone for the most
Yes, the isolation, and the isolation starts in labor, when a woman's left alone in labor.
part.
I often describe it as isolation, separation, and maternal and paternal deprivation.
Mm.
And but this is what is normal. So for years, I would say we have normalized what is pathological, which is for women to give birth in a brightly lit room with a bunch of strangers. And we have pathologized what is normal, which is for a woman to be in the setting in which she is most comfortable, and either on her own or with a few chosen friends, village around her, and everything there to support her. So yeah, the layers of support that are so important for a woman to have, for a man to have, for the couple to have, just aren't there. And what is there are all these messages that you're doing it wrong if you take your baby to bed with you, if you breastfeed exclusively, which means just breast milk, just the breast, for at least 3 to 6 months. I mean, we know now that skin to skin is critically important, that after birth, that mothers and babies or fathers and babies, whoever is the critical person caring for that baby, have 3 to 6 hours a day of skin to skin, naked, chest to chest care. What does it do? It grows a healthy gut. It causes hormones to be released that allow that baby to learn how to calm itself, self-calming. And of course, we're in a culture where calming is done by pharmaceutical drugs, earlier and earlier. So yeah, the normalization of what is pathological and the pathologizing of what is normal is something that is critically important to me. And when I talk about healing trauma, there's so much. I mean, we're very fortunate that there are many modalities these days for healing what has gone wrong. And it's almost like in nature where the antidote to a toxic substance, like let's say poison ivy or poison oak, will be, say, dock, and it grows right up next to it. It's nature designs that. Nature makes it possible. And indigenous people know this. People who live close to the land know this. They understand that we first have to look to nature to see what nature can provide. And wearing babies, not just having babies skin to skin, but wearing babies, not pushing them around in carriages. It's so important. But in a culture where you're criticized for doing that, it's very difficult. So I think the first thing that women need to do, and men, because men get traumatized by birth too, is to create a community of support around yourself. And that's not so easy to find. There are a number of websites these days for mothers that actually are infused with QAnon people who believe that Hillary Clinton was eating babies. And yeah, if you go on these websites and you think that you're getting support from women, you will also get a lot of information, seeming information, that has no validity at all, that is skewed in the direction of conspiracy thinking. So where's a mother to go? Well, there is a website that is extremely good for this, and it's called I'll remember it in a minute. Kindred Media. That's one thing that happens the older I get. I'm 78 now. Is
I'll link that.
words disappear. So it's kindredmedia.com. And if you go on that site and you open it up, it's like a whole universe of support is there for you. And it's not just about raising children. It's about raising consciousness. It's about healing ourselves. It's about nutrition. And then, of course, I could get into nutrition and the impact nutrition has on mothers and babies. I mean, human breast milk is exquisitely the right thing designed. I mean, that makes it sound like there's a God doing this. It's just, it has evolved. It's evolved to provide exactly what that baby needs. Mm-hmm. And in a group setting, that baby, the mother's milk will change in its constituents from day to day and even hour to hour according to the needs of that baby. I mean, that's just amazing stuff.
I've seen pictures where a mother's nursing maybe her toddler strictly on one side and her newborn on the other. Right. And then if she pumps or something, that the milk looks completely different. And I've heard stories about like the melatonin level is higher in breast milk in the evening, and like that it changes throughout the day. It's
right. The more you look into this, the more you realize the miracle of it all and the sacredness of it all. And it's difficult because women are acculturated and programmed to feel guilty about anything that went wrong, anything that we didn't do correctly, and to feel ashamed. And the moment we feel guilt and shame, we close down and we can't learn anymore. So that's the first thing that I want to let people know, is that there is no place for guilt or shame. Remorse, yes. Sadness, yes. Grief, yes. But guilt and shame stop us from growing, stop us from being open.
Would have stopped you from writing your book.
It's just crazy. I had this insane idea that if I told what I found to be the truth, what I had researched, what evidence had shown, that people would be really interested in it. It never occurred to me that people would be angry with me for sharing this information. And I'm thinking right now of a physician who did research at Harvard on electronic fetal monitoring and came up with results that he didn't like. It's not the results that he hoped for. He hoped to show that electronic fetal monitoring was essential and that it really helped in birth. What he found was that in random 1,000 consecutive labors, the electronic fetal monitoring would result in X number of cesarean births, X number of epidurals, but it would save maybe one baby's life in exchange for causing complications or being read as if it was complications to hundreds and hundreds of mothers and babies. So I was at a conference on the East Coast, and Dr. Haverkamp happened to be there, and I think I had just seen him speak. I'm not sure. He had the courage to speak about the fact that his research didn't show what he had hoped. And I was going up the escalator, and I saw Dr. Haverkamp coming down the escalator next to mine. I said, Dr. Haverkamp, And he looked at me and he shook his hand and he said, Suzanne Arms, you have destroyed women's trust in doctors. And the escalator went down and I went up, and it was like, did I really hear that?
Wow.
Because I admired him.
Yeah.
I thought he had courage.
Wow.
Oh gosh.
Guys,
Yeah.
giant
So I don't know what kept me going. A crazy notion that if you let people know the truth, that they will act accordingly.
I found that to be true when I started researching circumcision.
Yes.
I was like, oh my goodness, if I just am able to share what I've learned, parents are going to be like, I am so grateful for this information. Now I don't have to do this.
Let's
my baby. And I
exactly.
found people really upset with me. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. I see. Circumcision wasn't an issue of mine because I had a daughter, so I didn't have to think about it. Yeah. But then, as I began to research the impact of circumcision on baby boys, and the fact that it is removing the most sensitive tissue in the male body, and that it doesn't even matter if the baby is given a shot. It doesn't fully anesthetize it. And that, as Marilyn Milos, who started NoCirc, the organization NoCirc, said, it's the first time that a baby boy associates violence with pleasure. He knows something's going on in that part of his body because the foreskin is pulled and then it has to be scraped away from the penis, and then it is crushed, and then it is cut. And it's, how can that not be traumatizing, right? So, and yet it's been a long time that Marilyn and others have been struggling to get Jewish physicians and Jews to understand that circumcision is really a cultural issue. It is not a religious issue. I remember learning that the original covenant between the Jewish child at 7 days or the 8th day and God was like a little pinprick, a drop of blood. And it wasn't the removal of the whole foreskin, but what happened over time with Jewish elders noticing that many boys were, as they became men, pretending that they were not Jewish so that they would not be subjected to the terrible anti-Semitism of their culture. They would say they were Christian. And at that point, the Jewish elders decided to turn it into a complete removal of the foreskin. And it's just, it's so appalling. It's hard to speak about. When Marilyn first saw a circumcision, and she asked the pediatrician doing it, why do we do this? And he said, there is no medical reason. And the baby was screaming. She began to stutter. And she has stuttered for the rest of her life. And she's 80 now. And it's still something that when she talks about, she starts to stutter. So how could we think that nature created a penis that was formed wrong and therefore should have surgery done to it? How could we possibly think that? But we do.
When you have a mother who is advocating for the protection of her vulva and vagina and hiring people to protect her vagina and her vulva from being cut. Yeah. And then to either hand her baby over or let her partner decide because he has the penis, and like you can see it's like everything in them is like distraught at the idea and they just feel like it's something that has to be done.
Yeah,
that's right.
Choosing.
That's right. She doesn't want an episiotomy on herself, but she will allow, the This is a whole nother issue, because this baby has lived in this mother's body for 9 months and expects at a deep, deep, innate level that that mother will protect it. So when the mother says after birth, well, he's a boy, and so I need to let my husband decide, it's like, whoa, no, please. You are the ones who is the protector of your child. Yes, it is not comfortable truth to hear that, but in fact, it is true. The baby expects you to be the protector.
So I have a question, because I have worked with families for sure where, the mother feels coerced or ends up going through with the circumcision because of pressure from the family, definitely from the father of the baby, etc., and then is absolutely traumatized by it. And, I had a mom who was having a beautiful postpartum and then just spun into a horrible depression. And it affected so much about their, the breastfeeding relationship. Anyway, but just talking about that idea of repair, do you have any resources, or have you worked with people trying to do that type of repair, like between like the mother baby, or
I was going to ask in relation, because you were saying circumcision, but also in relation to moms who end up not being able to nurse for a million reasons,
Right.
like women who are listening to this and who either circumcised or weren't able to nurse, like, what now kind of thing, like, what can I do?
Well, there is a lot out there, and I don't do counseling one-on-one with women right now, but I think the first thing is to apologize to the baby, to the child. I'm really sorry, but this has to be done after the woman has done her own work and has talked to someone else and gotten her grief out, so that she's not sobbing to the baby, oh, I'm so sorry I did this to you. That is of no use at all. It has to be, honey, I'm really sorry this happened. I didn't know. And if I knew now, then what I know now, I wouldn't have done it. When we're talking about something as sensitive as circumcision or as breastfeeding, it's important for women to understand that a lot of remediation comes in holding, in cuddling, in skin to skin, in that very tender time before babies or young children go to sleep, in that, or when they're just waking up and they're still between the worlds of sleeping and waking. I believe that's the time when the woman, for example, can take her shirt off or lift her shirt, and she can hold the baby to her breast. And that baby gets to feel her heart. She can bottle feed in a breastfeeding way, where the baby is turned what they call en face, skin to skin against her chest, and she is looking into the baby's eyes as she uses a bottle. Instead of what we have as the distracted bottle feeding approach, which is the baby is kind of sitting on our lap or turned away from us, and the bottle is just jammed in the baby's mouth. So there are ways in which it's easier with breastfeeding than with circumcision, but with breastfeeding, we can mimic what nature does, and I think that's so important to remember, and above all, for women to remember that it's not your fault. You were raised in this culture. You were raised in that family. You didn't really have choice.
I did that with my son. He had a bunch of surgeries his first year of life, and so I got him donor milk for 2 years, but I would stick his bottle in my armpit, and I would be topless, and I would like just shift his mouth a little bit so he was in my armpit nursing instead of at my breast.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is just wonderful. It's just a matter of being creative and knowing, first of all, having a sense that the way nature has set things up to be is valuable, and it has a purpose, it has a function. And then as close as we can to mimicking that
Mhm.
is wonderful. Singing to the baby.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I can remember singing to a group of men at a ending circumcision conference, singing a song. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful?
Mhm.
I can't even finish it because I start to cry, you know. How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle and how deeply you're connected to my soul, you know?
Yeah.
Singing lullabies to ourselves.
And how you said about apologizing to the baby. I have a friend who died by suicide, and that was one thing that he could never get over. I would protest with him and about circumcision, and he always would share with me that his parents refused to apologize to him, and that was all he really wanted, was
Yeah,
to them
yeah,
come to say sorry. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much. I do want to remind people of kindredmedia.com, because it is like walking into a universe of a village
Mhm.
of real support. And it makes a world of difference, being alone, being isolated, and then feeling disconnected, not just from each other, but from ourselves, you know, being out in nature, hugging a tree, bringing our kids out in nature. If we live in a city, being near a little fountain or a waterfall in a park.
I tell families that when the babies are, like nothing else is working. You fed them, they have a clean diaper, nothing's working. I always, one of my friends told me to remember the senses, like to bring them outside into the fresh air, the wind,
Yes.
put their feet on the earth, run their foot underwater, let them look at the flicker of a flame, or,
Yes.
to just try to go back to the elements.
And that's a case where crying with your baby
Mm,
is okay.
yeah.
You know, it's not saying, I'm sorry I did this. It's like, I don't know what,
Yeah.
I'm so sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what to do. And it doesn't feel good, does it, sweetie?
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
repair piece, I mean, I use that just in my parenting journey because I always have moments I'm not proud of, specifically with my daughter, who is
Uh-huh.
my challenge in this life. And that I always try to remember I can always do the repair after. Like,
That's
even
right.
if I wasn't proud of what I said or how I handled it, there's
That's
always
right.
room for repair, and that I'm teaching her that you don't have to be perfect,
You
but
can't be perfect.
yeah, it's
Yeah. And that's very important. There is a difference between knowing what is ideal and living with what is reality, what is possible. You know, when you think about the women in the Ukraine and their babies and their children, and what do they do when they're feeling so anxious and so worried? They hold their babies and they sing, and they don't separate. They don't isolate and separate themselves from the baby. One of the things that I've noticed that happens often when babies are behaving in ways that are very difficult for parents, and crying is one of the big issues, because crying re-stimulates our own feelings of not having been tended to when we were crying, is often these parents will place the baby in longer and longer hours away in daycare because the baby is, quote, difficult. And so then the baby is punished for being, quote, difficult and what it really needed, because crying is a signal. Crying is a form of communication that it's up to us to try and understand. The baby gets there's something even more wrong with it, you know? So I applaud you for doing that. And I think as women and men get together and talk about what creative things they've come up with to help repair themselves, it will help. And I go back to the fact that we need community. We need to find people who want to hang out with us when we have a baby. We need to find out, people who will come and hold our baby while we take a shower. And often people come after birth and they want to play with the baby, but what really is needed is they need to take care of the mother. And I remember when we had an organization called The Birthplace that created a birth center in Palo Alto, California. We would suggest that people create a month-long calendar after birth that they put a friend or a family member in charge of, so that when people called to say, well, what can I do? There would be a list of things you could do. Well, it would be really nice, since you don't live too near, if you could put in some money for cloth diaper service, or if you live really near, if you could bring a meal Tuesday night. Does that be possible? We don't have anyone bringing a meal on Tuesday night. And we'd suggest that the calendar be filled up and that people be told to bring the food in pans or dishes and leave it at the door and knock, and then come back and collect it the next day, dirty, to tell the mother not to clean it, not to wash it, but to leave the dishes or the pans outside dirty. So often people come to see the baby and the mother gets up and she takes care of the guest. We've just got it all backwards.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, we did that, and it was a real help. We also suggested to women going to birth in the hospital that they create some goodies for the people who were taking care of them, that they create muffins or something, and in labor brought in a can full of things they had made, because they got better care when they did that. The nurse remembered, oh, the woman in 17, she made those muffins, So there's a lot of little things that we can do when we're living in a system that's got it all wrong. But I think as we talk to more people who have creative ideas, it will spur our own creativity.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast and chatting with us today. And is there any
You're
way
welcome.
if people want to reach out to you, that they can connect with you, and we can leave
Sure.
show notes?
Sure. My email is Suzanne Birthing, BIRTHING, @gmail.com. And I have a nonprofit, and it's called Birthing the Future. And I don't yet have all the films up on that will be up on as MP4 soon, but right on the homepage there is a series of 5 talks that I gave to small groups called the Human Attachment Project, that I think might give them some real support, a feeling of support. So it's birthingthefuture.org.
Great.
And they can find the breastfeeding book that I was the 3rd author on, is called Bestfeeding, BESTFEEDING. And they're going to have to get it as a used book. It's not still in print, just like Immaculate Deception is not still in print. But the first author on it is Renfrew, RENFREW, Mary Renfrew, and Chloe Fisher. And those are 2 British women. Actually, Chloe is Scottish, and Mary's Scottish, and Chloe is English. Because I was the 3rd author and photographer. So getting that book, Breastfeeding, will really, really help. The one piece that they don't have in that book is on self-attachment, where you'd simply let the baby creep up and attached to your breasts, because babies know how to do that.
Breast crawl.
And
Mhm.
bobbing their head from side to side and then latching on. So there's a lot out there. I think if they go on Kindred Media, I think some of it is if they go on my site. And the most important thing to remember is that this is a far from perfect world, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't strive to know what is ideal and then accept what is less than ideal as the way it is, without criticizing ourselves in addition. Accept it, learn from it, say, gee, I wouldn't do that again. Grieve it with friends, create a sacred circle where you can talk about it, and then talk to our own kids about it.
Beautiful.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you. I'm really appreciative of your work. You're in the trenches, as they say. So thank you, because we're not lone voices, but we're still a minority right now.
Yeah.
And we need to do what we're doing and keep up our own hope as best we can. Thanks for having me.
Thanks everybody for listening. You can find us at Born Wild Podcast on Instagram. For inquiries or feedback, you can email us at bornwildpodcast@gmail.com. You can find me, Emma Ray, on Instagram at Emma Ray, REA.
Sophia at sophiabirth.com.
And me, Lea, at Bay Area Home Birth.
We would really appreciate it if you would rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps us reach more people. And as always,
Stay wild.